Freedom is the right to tell what they do not want to hear. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. Tired of the same repetitive government narratives? Then wave goodbye to the distractions and rhetoric of corporate media. For this is Anti-Media Radio.
But I want to get the language right.
The government is in trouble.
You're all a bunch of slaves! Bunch of slaves!
What we need in the United States is not violence and lawlessness, but it's love and wisdom and compassion toward one another.
What's your definition of media?
And now, here's your host, S.M. Gibson.
What is wrong with the people? Why can't they wake up? Why can't they pay attention to anything that is going on right in front of them? My name is S.M. Gibson, and this is Anti-Media Radio, September the 22nd, 2015. So far, this year in the United States of America, there have been 868 police officers shot. There have also been 95 officers killed in the line of duty, but those statistics include 25 officers that have died from automobile accidents, 16 officers that have died from heart attacks, and 27 officers that have died from gunfire from someone that murdered them. And that is a shame, but the 95 does include all kinds of stats versus 868. Also in the city of Chicago, with their strict gun laws that our current president would like to see implemented around the country, have seen 2,211 people shot so far in 2015, 378 homicides, and over 132 people have been executed in Saudi Arabia so far this year. Those are a few stats that we like to give out at the beginning of every single episode here on Tuesday and Thursday on Anti-Media Radio because the mainstream doesn't talk about it. It doesn't want you to have the real information so you can know what's going on in the world. Shannon, You're gonna have to hold me back tonight because my mind is blown right now.
That's not the only thing that got blown.
Buddy, as always in the studio, our great producer, Mr. Shannon Madden. But I tell you what, my head, I can't catch myself tonight. There's so many different stories going on, and I want to start with the big one over in the UK. I will say, quote, unquote, allegedly. At the beginning of this, everything I'm about to say is allegedly, but wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yeah.
David Cameron, the Prime Minister of England.
Now, wait, before you tell the story, don't blow it out of proportion, all right?
David Cameron, the Prime Minister of England, I did not have sexual relations with that hog. David Cameron, the Prime Minister of England, one of the most powerful people in the world, a world leader on the grandest stage of all. We're talking maybe second to Barack Obama here as far as the way the world is set up. Had sex with a pig when he was in college.
No, now let's be fair. It wasn't complete sex with a live pig. It was innocent. He just stuck
a dead pig.
He stuck his member in the mouth of a dead pig. That's totally understandable. Right.
Tomorrow, the headlines over the UK are going to be about how David Cameron had told another member of Parliament how he was born with 2 silver spoons in his mouth, as well as how he had tried to get the KGB to buy him drugs, as well as he had bribed some people over millions of dollars. But, you know, he apparently did a bunch of drugs when he was young. This all came out from Lord Ashcroft. But listen, this is a man that just tweeted out a week ago when Jeremy Corbyn became head of the Labour Party that the Labour Party is now a threat to national security. And I can't tell you that I agree with everything about Jeremy Corbyn. I think he has good intentions. I don't agree with all of his policies, but at the same time,
security. Come on, man.
But at the same time, right? He's definitely not. The guy does want peace. He does advocate for peace, and I think that's fantastic.
It's a great start.
Yeah, and Cameron is definitely not that. So because he does want peace, that's a threat to national security. Okay. By the way, there's supposedly a photo of David Cameron's college initiation into this dining club when he was a university student at Oxford, performing this bestiality / necrophilia / who knows what else act, so he could be cool or whatever it is. And here's the thing too, this is why it's not so far, like, the people of the UK are already just like, yeah, we believe it. They deal with pedophilia. There's people in Westminster, people, members of Parliament that get caught all the time that they're molesting children, they're pedophiles, and then they'll go murder these children. Like, this isn't the craziest thing that they've had to deal with.
No, certainly not. And that's why when people hear something like this, it's, okay, whatever.
And for the American audience right now, they're like, well, what does that have to do with us? This is just some stupid, silly scandal. No. This is what people need to realize, is that politics have become very global. And when there is, for instance, Syria. Cameron's all about going to Syria, and he's all about overthrowing Assad. And who else is? Us. The United States needs support from somebody. If it was just the United States saying, we're going to go do this, everybody, we don't think so. You have to remember how everything's interconnected and how everything works. David Cameron is definitely a big piece of the puzzle here. And the United Kingdom is definitely a big piece of the puzzle in U.S. foreign policy because they back up
particularly in the Middle East.
Particularly. Tony Blair did it. People were over the moon about Tony Blair in 97, and then he turns into another Bush. You've got people like Noel Gallagher going to meet him at one point and thinking, this guy's great, this guy's cool, and he just turns into another Bush. And that's what we're dealing with Cameron, except, this rich kid, boys' school. Remember the story of John Kerry and the Skull and Bones and Don't Tase Me, Bro. It's similar to that. The dining club in question at Oxford that Cameron was a member of, they're very notorious for having these wild parties with lots of drugs, lots of sex. So this isn't some crazy, this could have never happened. We're talking world leaders. This is what we're dealing with, the sick mentality of the people that are running the world. This is the issue.
I really don't see what the big deal is. I mean, right now in the polls here in America, we have a candidate, Donald Trump, who has had a lot of women in his life who have slept with a pig. So,
woo!
Yeah, that's that, and again, that's pretty much par for the course. These are the leaders and people that we look to and trust to help us guide our lives, and that's why we here at Anti Media strongly believe that the government is way too involved in our life in all shapes, form, or fashion. And because number one,
this isn't about
morally. These are the people. Morally, these
are the people passing laws.
Got it.
People think laws are morals, and these people are passing laws.
And these people are passing laws about morals. Come on now. Wow.
For instance, Cameron. Hey, look, we've never seen this in the United States. When Cameron, when he was going into office, a lot of people were very optimistic about him. He seemed very laxed on the drug laws, and speaking in the UK, talking, let's bring marijuana down. It's not a big deal. He never said that he had done drugs, but he said that I had I think basically the quote was the typical college experience. So he's never denied that he did drugs. And supposedly...
You went to college, right?
Yeah.
I went to college too. Never, ever, ever did I stick my member in a dead pig.
Well, you also didn't have, according to David Cameron, 2 silver spoons in your mouth, and were given the reins of the country at some point.
Silver spoon's a lot better than a pecker, I'm just saying.
I guess so. Yeah.
Well, that kind of leads us into our next story, and primarily because it deals with seedy, sexual behavior. But this is if that story wasn't weird enough, this is a very disturbing story, and I have to kind of warn you right now, it's pretty hairy. Our own Claire Burnage, who we tried desperately to get on the air tonight, Miss Claire is predisposed. But she wrote an excellent story up on antimedia.org right now, and you really need to go check it out. This is kind of tough, and we talk all the time about the troops, which we absolutely do support our troops. The troops that are going in, unfortunately, a lot of them come from various different situations where the military is pretty much the only option they'll have for a career, for an education, things like that. And they wind up getting in, and they find out what really happens when you go to war and the things that you see in other cultures and things like that.
The troops are like everything else. There's really good troops, there's really bad troops.
Mm-hmm. Just like there's really good cops and there's really bad cops.
Right. And
doesn't mean that all the troops are bad, doesn't mean that all the cops are bad.
It doesn't mean all the troops are good, and doesn't mean all the cops are good.
Bingo. Well, this story's coming out of Afghanistan. Captain Dan Quinn, who was a member of the United States Special Forces, was forced into retirement after he attacked a Afghani military commander, militia commander, who had kept a young boy chained to his bed as a sex slave.
Say that one more time.
Captain Dan Quinn, United States Special Forces, was forced into retirement by the United States military because he attacked an Afghan militia commander who had a young boy chained to his bed as a sex slave. The militia commander received no reprimand whatsoever because apparently in Afghanistan it is a cultural thing over there for the wealthy and privileged, just like what we see in Great Britain all the time. It's been widely reported. Wealthy businessmen, military commanders, whatever. It's a term, and forgive me if I pronounce it wrong. That's why I really wanted Miss Claire to give this story, since she knows all of the proper pronunciation. She's much smarter.
I'll take the bullet for you. Bakabazi.
Bakabazi, it's B-A-C-H-A-B-A-Z-I is how it's spelled. It's basically a practice that involves the purchase of young boys from poor families or orphanages.
It means boy play, though, by the way.
That's exactly right. That's the translation. But basically, poor families or orphanages basically just give these young boys off to these wealthy people who pay whatever amount for them, primarily for the use of sex slave. That's it. They dress them up as girls, have them perform little dances like, I guess, kabuki or whatever, Japanese culture. And then, basically just pretty much just about out in the open. Various different military personnel have reported over the years that, they could hear them screaming at night and were reported by their commanders not to do anything about it. That's not our business. That's their local customs. However, Afghanistan has laws on the books about this practice. And it is completely, the United States military has turned a blind eye over there for whatever reason.
So wait, I thought from what I heard from our politicians that we were overseas for moral reasons because of these monsters over there that did these horrible things. And yet you're telling me when a military soldier witnessed and experienced a horrible thing and tried to do something about it.
And we're not just talking about some buck private who didn't have training. We're talking about a captain of the special forces. You know how highly trained of an individual that
tried
is?
to do something about a grown man raping a child.
I don't know
who got punished.
Don't know what the circumstances were as far as whether he walked in and saw the boy. That would be enough for me. If I walked in and saw a kid chained to a bedpost and some leering guy standing over off to the side or this, that, and the other, just casually having a conversation, yeah, I think my first reaction would be to jack him up too.
Yeah.
So again, here we have a soldier, very well respected, highly trained United States Special Forces captain, who witnesses something he didn't like and attacks this military commander. Basically, picked him up and body slammed him, and it was reprimanded for that. Was basically forced into an early retirement.
Reprimanded.
And that sounds like
reprimanded.
That sounds like a soldier that I want on a battlefield anywhere.
Reprimanded.
Someone who's not only just a good soldier, but also a moral human being.
You don't even have to have the greatest, moral compass in the world to know that's out of bounds.
Oh, what out of bounds doesn't even touch that. I mean, that's so disgusting.
The problem
so
here,
it's not even funny.
Reprimanded. Mm-hmm. Is this the world we're living in?
Mm-hmm. In the United
Where
States,
U.S. soldiers are trying to stop a man from raping a child and the soldier gets in trouble? Mm-hmm. Where prime ministers can have sex with pigs? Where members of parliament in England can just have sex with children and murder them? Like, that's the world we live in.
Absolutely right. And those are the people that we look to and trust. Everybody's crying out for a leader. God, we need a leader to save us, to right this country, to steer us in the right direction. Oh, no, we don't.
Yeah, that's it.
Because they've done quite the opposite.
It is.
Quite the opposite, and now even more so.
But this goes back to the way people adhere to the politicians, and they adhere to the media, especially the media. The BBC didn't report the Cameron stuff. Where are they at? Where are they at talking about it? It's the biggest thing on the internet. They're not talking about it. Mm-hmm. Everybody's talking about it. BBC don't touch it. Why? Because they're in the back pocket. Because let me tell you something. Everything anyone in the United States hears on mainstream, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, from over there, comes from the BBC. Mm-hmm. And the BBC is in their hip pocket.
Rupert Murdoch's from where again?
Speaking of, yeah.
That guy.
Let's talk about the media for a second, because we always the same country. Hold on, I'm gonna flip the script here for just a second. The same country that is about to crucify a man, literally crucify, not in the the broad sense of crucify, literally nail a human being to wood. And they die because he protested against his government. The exact same government that is also ordered 1,000 lashes because a guy blogged about free speech in this country. The same country, the United States is great friends with. We talk about them almost every episode, because they are the huge problem, and that is Saudi Arabia. Two things about Saudi Arabia that's just fantastic, great news. For those of you who don't know it, the reason that the mainstream media doesn't really report about Saudi Arabia is because there is a man by the name of Al-Walid bin Talal. He is the second largest voting shareholder for 21st Century Fox. He is the largest individual. He is the largest individual shareholder in Citigroup. He is a member of the Saudi royal family. He's the nephew of the late King Abdullah, which passed away in January?
Rest in peace.
Yeah. Yeah. Middle finger right up at him. That's why they don't talk about Saudi Arabia, is because the media is controlled by it. We know for a fact that they were buying commercials against the Iranian deal, and we're airing them on U.S. television. These people have all the money in the world.
For all the money in the world that the Rothschilds don't have.
So that brings us to this great new thing that's just happened this week. God bless Saudi Arabia. How is this real? How is this real?
This story gets funnier and funnier the more you read it, too.
This is literally like The Onion, and it's not. The United Nations has picked Saudi Arabia to head its human rights panel. Crucifying somebody for talking about the government. Got some guy in prison for blogging about free speech and has violently tortured him. And has beheaded 130 people in public this year.
Just this year alone.
Human rights panel.
The UN Human Rights Council also has, and this is why I looked over at you when you sent me this when we were preparing for the show tonight, and I looked over at you and I was like, now this is a joke, really. Where'd you get this from?
Yeah, you literally thought it was a joke.
And this is why, because at the end of the story, this just brought me to tears. The Human Rights Council also consists of current members, and there's more members, but they include China, Russia, and Venezuela. Russia and Venezuela, okay, but China?
Great.
China?
Yeah. Look, if we're going to let Saudi Arabia head it, give everybody a place at the table.
Head it. That's not funny.
I mean, everything has become, the world is becoming The Onion. Everything's becoming satire. We talked about this last week, but there's an energy company, Genie Energy, getting the rights to drill in Syria. Mm-hmm. And on the council, like it sounds made up, mm-hmm. Lord Jacob Rothschild, Rupert Murdoch, mm-hmm. and Dick Cheney. Mm-hmm. And they just added some guy that's ex-head of the CIA on the board.
And what's his name? Old Gary Richardson, too. Wow.
It's like it's make-believe. It's that crazy. This is what's happening in the world. That's all true. That's Genie Energy.
Mm-hmm. You bought your stock yet?
Oh, no, I don't want those. I don't want the blood of those children on my hands. This is the world we're living in. Like, it sounds so crazy.
And it's hard. It really is hard to get people fired up about it. The average American fired up. What's happening all over there? What do you think?
How? Listen, you got all these politicians that are like, every time they look at Chris Christie. Well, that's a different story, but Chris Christie.
Yeah, speaking of pigs.
9/11. All the politicians did it for 10 years. 9/11. You say anything, 9/11. Ron Paul would open his mouth about something, 9/11.
It was a reason we had to listen to Rudy Giuliani.
Yeah, that's all you get. God. And yet, 15 of the 19 hijackers were from Saudi Arabia. There's 28 pages sitting in Congress right now that may or may not, allegedly, point to the Saudi royal family financing the entire thing. Human Rights Council.
Human rights.
Oh my gosh. What is wrong with people?
There's no women on that council, I hope.
What is wrong with people? If Saudi Arabia is in charge, there won't be.
That's kind of where I was pointing.
As long as they don't have to drive there.
Yeah.
What is wrong with people? Like, my mind's blown. I told you being in the show I was going to get veered off, and you got to steer me in, Shannon.
You said blown. I'm sorry, it just keeps going back to that. That is the most incredible story going back to the David Cameron thing, I mean, and again, I know the average listener or the average observer, the casual observer is going to say, well, that was a college prank, kids drinking in college, this, that, and the other, so on and so forth. I don't know. I've done some stupid stuff, and I never let people let them take pictures of me doing it. I'm smart enough for that. I'm not a world leader.
That's a security threat. First off, again,
if I'd done something like that without those silver spoons born into my mouth, yeah, I'm probably, there's going to be some backlash.
It's literally a security threat, Shannon, because let me tell you why. Because if you're in the military and you're trying to get clearances in the United States, and it goes up and up and up, depends on where you work and what you're doing in the United States, and we're talking way less than the Prime Minister of the UK here, you have to tell them everything you've ever done in your life. And, there's certain things like, if you've had an affair, you can be blackmailed over that. You can't have an affair in your record. I know if you've done a bunch of drugs, I know that you have to go and tell the government, or you have to tell every member of your family, everything you've ever done. Every drug you've ever done, every bad thing you've ever done, because then it's out in the open with everybody. A foreign power can't blackmail you. So it's a real security threat when there's a picture of the head of the country sticking his member in a pig's mouth. Dead pig's mouth.
And the question has been raised pre-show whether the pig was alive or dead before he stuck it in his mouth. I mean, we don't know how big of a member we're talking about here.
Oh my gosh, how is any of this real? How is this the world we live in? Like, why are people not at the doorsteps like you see on the old cartoons with people with their pitchforks and what's going on? This is the world we live in. Oh, my goodness. We are going to bring on here in a few minutes the amazing Justin King, the founder of The Fifth Column, and one of our amazing writers at Anti-Media, who broke a story for the world yesterday. And when it was released, for about the first 12 hours, the story was up. Everybody was telling him it was BS. It's not real. And sure enough, by the end of the day, everybody else picked up on it. It was reported around the world. But Justin was on it before everybody else. So I'll let him, once we get him on the line, let him go a little bit deeper into that.
Incredible story.
Yeah, it's a credible story, so stick around for that. I just can't get over the ties of everything. We've got Scott Walker dropped out of the race. Oh, great. That's fantastic. Who cares? That SNL character. Carly Fiorina, who's up there trying to make... Yeah, Carly Fiorina, who's up on stage trying to make everybody think that her 30-year-old stepchild died from smoking marijuana.
I'm sorry. I'm a little stoned. I shouldn't laugh at that.
I mean, seriously, though, it's like, she's so part of the military-industrial complex. She's about to be the next big push. Come on.
Yeah. She,
if
you want to look at her corporate record versus George W. Bush's corporate record, yeah, they're pretty similar.
Rubio overtook Trump in Florida. Or not Trump, Bush.
In his own home state?
Mm-hmm. Rubio.
I want to tell you about that. You got to watch that.
Well, Rubio's from down there, too, and it's something we have talked about a lot on Anti-Media is I know Nick believes it. Nick believed it a long time, and I think that the establishment is going to push Rubio through. I genuinely do. Like, I think the establishment is going to try to force Rubio through as president. I think they're giving you Bush to say, yeah, he's the bad man. He's the old Bush. You don't want him. Rubio's saying the same thing by the Bushes. Cheney has come out and been like, Rubio would be a great president.
Oh, of course he would.
Right, that's red flag number one.
Yeah.
And yet,
when the Dark Lord gives you his vote of confidence, you pretty much take that one to the bank.
and that's what he is. He's literally like Cheney is. He does look just like the Dark Lord.
Cheney is the Dark Lord, man. What are you talking about? There's no two ways around that.
Let's yeah. What can you do? Let's go ahead and bring the fantastic writer story we told you a little bit about earlier, teased everybody with. Justin King, the founder of Fifth Column News and also a journalist for antimedia.org. Justin, how are you doing tonight?
Doing pretty good. How are you?
I can't complain. I've been sitting here screaming my head off about David Cameron, but other than that, I can't complain.
Yeah, that's something else.
Well, just for pure tabloid purposes, it's probably the greatest story I've ever heard. But okay, so Justin, tell everybody about the story that you had the exclusive on that went up yesterday. I know it's going to relate back to a story that most everybody had already heard, but you had a not just a little bit of a twist, a lot of bit of a twist to the details of it.
Well, the refugee that everybody knows is the poor innocent refugee that was kicked by the Hungarian journalist turned out to be an al-Nusra fighter.
Wow.
Yeah, that was one that I have to admit, not much surprises me anymore. That shocked the hell out of me. Yeah, so basically I was sitting there and I got a message from one of the Anons that is really plugged into Rojava, which is this cool little anarchist Kurdish community. And he gives me this information. He's like, hey, they're saying that this guy was, linked up with al-Nusra, and for those who don't know, these are bad guys. I mean, we're funding them right now, but they're not nice people, okay? And that they think he suspected, or, they're suspecting him of being involved in this massacre in this village. And when it was the first time, I have to admit, I kind of was like, okay, whatever, I didn't pay that much attention to it until maybe 45 minutes later. I had a YPG person that I'm friends with, and these are the Kurdish female fighters that everybody's in love with. One of those girls sent me something that's almost identical. So I was like, okay, well, I'll start looking into it. And then YPD, which is one of the Kurdish military groups, so many initials in this, their intelligence group had got his Facebook page, and they'd gone through and basically confirmed that this guy was working with them for about 3 years. That's what their statement is.
And for those people who don't know, like, this guy became the darling of media. He got a job in Spain as a football coach / soccer coach, whatever you call it, wherever you're at. Yeah, and it's funny because he actually was a
soccer coach in Syria. Back in 2004, he worked for, I believe they were called the Al-Fatwas. And what's funny about that is that even back then, there are allegations that, in 2004, there was this huge uprising amongst the Kurdish community because, their ethnic group was getting slaughtered by Saddam, or had been getting slaughtered by Saddam, and this guy's team started holding pictures of Saddam up during this football game, this soccer game. And it started a riot, which turned into a full-scale insurrection. And 32 people got killed there. And there are some Kurdish groups that are claiming that he actually threw the first Molotov cocktail during that incident. I haven't been able to confirm that. I'm not sure that I believe it. But, the accusation's there.
Right, wow.
And so, anyway, then the guy basically, he drops off the planet for a little while, and then he resurfaces fighting with al-Nusra. And they, as far as the war crime allegation of him being involved with the slaughter, they can put him in the village, but they can't put him there. They can't prove he was there at the correct time. So I'm a little hesitant to, condemn him of that. But he did fight for this group. People are saying he could be conscripted, and that's true. They could have forced him to do it. Islamic State does it.
That's what I was about to say, because we all know there are people that that are forced to fight. Is it possible that he was a good guy, just to play devil's advocate, that was forced to do this, or does history tell us that he probably isn't this media darling like everyone wants us to think?
Well, there is the possibility that he was conscripted and he was forced to do this. That kind of falls apart when you look at the length of time that he was allegedly with them, which is about 3 years. If you're trying to get away from somebody, within 3 years you can probably do it.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that as soon as his group starts getting, stopped, and the Russians are coming in to assist Assad, and all of this stuff is on the horizon, this is when he can break free. It seems to me like he had a good idea of what was coming. Now, the other thing we have to remember is that al-Nusra is a terrorist organization, okay? But everybody's a terrorist organization now. They do have legitimate soldiers. This guy could have fought for his side with honor and never done anything wrong. It's a possibility. I don't know how much, I don't know if it's probable, but it's possible. So that's the basic gist of it. We're still getting more information, and we're trying to find out exactly what everybody wants to do. I mean, the Kurds want him. They want him in hand. However, nobody's going to hand him over to the Kurds because they're not a country.
And so basically, though, the Kurds are already coming out and saying that he is a war criminal, hand him over to us.
Right. They're making that accusation. Some elements are. The Central Command, all they're saying at this moment is he fought for al-Nusra. They've talked about the other allegations, but they're referring to them as allegations. They're not confirming them yet. Some of the more hardline groups are already ready to execute this guy.
And I know at this point, I guess he's still in Spain, doing his thing there. And two, he was used, first off, and this, this comes out, and, it kind of makes the report. The reporter, 99.99999% had no idea who this person was when she tripped him. Right. Soon. Right. So it doesn't make the reporter look like, oh, you tripped a bad guy. It's just tripping a person.
Yeah, I mean that was pure luck.
Correct.
She wasn't fighting a blow for, or slinging a kick for justice or anything. She got lucky.
But I have thought too for a while, especially with some of the statistics that have come out with different nations accepting refugees into their countries outside of of course, are everybody's favorite, Saudi Arabia and Israel. It seems like right when nations say, okay, we're going to accept this number of refugees in, then they turn around and say, and now we're going to go bomb Syria. I know Australia's done it. We all know what the United States is doing, and Cameron's, called for, Assad to be thrown out. So do you personally believe that there's any correlation of using the refugees as propaganda to overthrow Assad?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is no doubt in my mind that is, it probably wasn't planned, but the second it became an option, they're using it as that. And that's why the Saudis, because the Saudis want Assad gone as well. And that's the reason they're not accepting any refugees.
Well, I think the Saudis want him. I think the Saudis want him gone more than anybody. And then it goes back to your point. A year ago, I think it was the UN Council came out and said they expected another 4 million refugees to flee Syria in the next year. So it's not like this just all of a sudden one day this just happened. The people in the know knew this was coming.
Oh, yeah. And truthfully, this isn't a crisis. If you actually look at the real numbers, they aren't huge numbers. You know, people hear 100,000 people. Oh, my God, that's so many. But when you're talking about, like, the U.S., you know, people are freaking out because we might accept 85,000 of them. That's not even a percent of a percent. I mean, it's this tiny, tiny number. So it's not as big of a crisis as they're making it out to be, which always leads to propaganda. Anytime something's getting blown up way beyond what it really is, you've got to watch what's going on, and I do think that's what's happening here. And I mean, no, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I think that they are seizing an opportunity to get Assad out. Assad, they've wanted him gone
For a long time.
for years. I mean, back in, I think it was 2012, Obama flat out said, "We'll rebuild the country, but it won't be under Assad." You know, we'll rebuild the country, but we're going to overthrow your president first. You know, and Assad's not a nice guy, but he's a whole lot better than the Islamic State.
It's true, but okay, look, you know, Petraeus coming out saying we're going to support Al Qaeda as long as they're overthrowing Assad. Like, that's crazy. That we have gone from 9/11, Al Qaeda's the worst thing ever. Let's kill them all. Now we'll work with them as long as they'll take out this guy. And they'll say it publicly.
Yeah. And that's, I do believe, and I don't want to tip my hand on my next big story, but
break it here, right now.
I'll give you a hint when we get done with this. But
okay.
I do think that the reason the Defense Intelligence Agency is in full-blown revolt, I mean, there's no other way to describe it. Their analysts are filing lawsuits. Their field agents just aren't working. And, you know, their main guy flat out said, Syria is going to break up. Iraq is going to break up. What that means is there's no reason to intervene in these countries because they're not going to be there. You know,
it's been in the plans for a while to separate what Iraq and is it 3 separate countries they wanted?
Well, here's the thing: you've got two different bodies and 2 different schools of thought on that within our government. One, the logical side, wants the country to break up because when we drew the borders way back, you know, at the end of colonialism, we drew them based on natural resources rather than the ethnic groups. And that's what screwed up the Middle East. You have a bunch of ethnic groups there that really don't have much in common other than, you know, them being relatively close together geographically. And, you know, there should be a Kurdistan, a Sunni land, you know, whatever you want to call it. They should break them up. I think that would actually help a lot as far as the stability of the Middle East. Those are people that are thinking along the lines of what is best for the people on the ground. The rest of the government, and this is the reason we keep intervening and trying to keep these countries whole, wants to keep the countries whole because we have all of these contracts with this dead, failed government in Baghdad. If Iraq breaks up, those contracts aren't worth the paper they're printed on.
Right. That's exactly true. I completely agree with that. But I think, look, they just did it with Libya. You know, they overthrow a country without overthrowing a country.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a failed foreign policy. It's a bad idea. And it's causing, and we're finally starting to see, you know, you don't have intelligence agencies do what the DIA is doing. It does not happen.
No,
there are very few things that could cause that. And my hint to everybody is going to be, y'all need to go watch the movie Clear and Present Danger because something happened. that calls the BIA to behave in this way. So there was definitely, I do believe that the BIA feels betrayed.
I see. For me, I see you're way more hands-on, I think, with a lot of the foreign policy than myself. And me, I've always been drawn to the propaganda side of things, more or less. And I feel like, for me, my flags start going up when I see certain propaganda. And to me, the big one lately, and I'd love to get your opinion on this, we haven't actually had a chance to talk about this yet, is the whole quote, unquote, Russia intervention thing. I believe this is a way bigger story than people are making it out to be, because we're definitely seeing the media and we're seeing the politicians saying, but Russia's getting involved. It's like Russia has been involved with them, giving them arms since 1956. Russia's signed an agreement with them since 1946, since, they became their own independent country from France completely. And they've been supplying them arms on paper since 56, and now all of a sudden, well, Russia's giving them arms, they're coming in, they're helping, it's like, but they're there to help drive out the terrorists that the U.S. helped create and arm and fund.
Right. It's a bigger story on a couple of levels than what the media, and it is propaganda, because they're framing it as a Russian intervention. The Russians are not intervening. They are not invading. They were asked.
Yes.
They are supporting an ally.
And again, they were asked, but at the same time, they've supported them for years and years and years and years. This isn't some new thing.
Right. The only difference is now they're putting their Spetsnaz guys on the ground.
Right.
Now, it's funny because it's the exact same, they're in the exact same situation we are in Iraq. They've been dealing with this country for 60, 70 years. They don't want it to break up, because then their contracts are bad. It's the same thing. It's money. That's why the Russians are getting involved. And they're definitely irritating the United States with this, because the truth of the matter is, when they committed, it was brinksmanship. It was Cold War style brinksmanship, and they were they were daring the administration to double down and put U.S. troops in, and we aren't going to do that. I find that highly unlikely that we're going to send in U.S. troops. Not this close to an election. They timed this perfectly.
But here's the thing, I agree with that, but at the same time, if this carries over to the election, I personally believe whoever the next president is going to be will be a Republican. I don't doubt, give them 2 weeks, they'll have people in there.
I'm skeptical, mainly because while we talk a big game about our military superiority, the Russians aren't far behind us, and the Russians have a lot of abilities that we don't have. Their doctrine, when it comes to fighting wars like this, is very different than ours. They're not going to go in there to win hearts and minds. They're going to go in there to drive the enemy out. They're not going to be worried about civilian casualties. They're not going to be worried about a lot of things the U.S. military at least pays lip service to. So I don't see any, it depends on the president, because we've got some real boneheads running, but I don't see any president that gets a good foreign policy advisor is going to tell them that this is a lost cause, that they need to stay out and just let the Russians deal with it. Because if we go in, that poll is going to be insane.
Okay, let's say, for instance, though, just, again, devil's advocate here. If we get a Rubio or a Bush or somebody with that mentality, that we've already seen the recklessness that can be caused in that region. Even, Wesley Clark coming out saying, we're taking out these 7 countries, under the Bush administration, blah, 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 whatever. do you think if we have that same mentality, Rubio Bush, that they will push forward and just, push us into World War III? Because I think a lot of people, whether it's true or not, a lot of people would believe if a Bush, and to me, a Bush is Rubio, same person. Mm-hmm. You would get that crazy, renegade, we're going in, deal with it.
I think that had Russia not put troops on the ground, I think that if we had Bush or Bush Light, then yeah, I think that we would be going in. But I think Russia putting their troops in the way they have, if we go in, we are declaring war on Russia. There's no other way to look at it. They were invited, we were not. And I don't think any of these people have the slickness to sell that to any international body. And I don't even think the American people will buy it. I think they're going to understand that if we go in there...
They're buying it now, though. The scary thing is because they keep selling Iran, which we all know what that is. But to me, the scary thing is when CNN sits there and Rubio gets done with a debate, and he sounds like more of a warmonger to me than Jeb. And they get done, and all the pundits are like, what a great foreign policy he has. I don't know about everything else, but Rubio was just fantastic on foreign policy. Like, to me, that's where the propaganda starts clicking again. It's like, are you serious? Like, this is the guy? Like, are you crazy?
Yeah, and they'll say that because, it's not them or their kids that'll end up going.
Right.
But I don't see the American people being dumb enough to fall for this again. I really don't, and not up against Russia.
You got a lot more faith in people than I do.
We spent 50 years trying to avoid this exact scenario. The Cold War, we fought proxy wars. The second one of us put troops on the ground, all we did was provide covert aid. We didn't put troops on the ground in the same place because one errant airstrike, and we were in World War III.
Yeah.
And I don't think that the Joint Chiefs would recommend it, and I do think that in that kind of scenario, you're already starting to see major components of the Department of Defense kind of thumb their nose at the administration and the idea of intervention. I think if it's going up against Russia, I think you'll see the Secretary of the Army and the Secretary of the Navy and the Secretary of the Marines and the Air Force come out and say, we can't do this.
Now, let me ask you this. Okay, going back to, what Wesley Clark had come out and said was the plan, which did include Syria, did include Iran, which, again, for listeners that don't know, Iran and Syria and Russia are all allies with each other. If that was the plan as was stated, obviously the United States had to have a sense of maybe Russia would get involved.
I think that under the current administration, I think that they were a little bit, and by current administration, I mean the last 12 years.
Right.
16 years. I mean, we're in George Bush's fourth term when it comes to foreign policy. I do think that the powers that be grossly overestimated Putin, or grossly underestimated Putin. And I think over the last couple of years, especially with Ukraine and these locations, I think they've realized that, George Bush was a director of the CIA, okay? But he was a political appointee. Putin was a KGB guy that when the Berlin riots were going on, he stayed behind burning secrets. It's a very different.
Oh yeah, I mean,
dynamic,
I go on about this all the time. The fact that Putin has never held a job in his life that made over $60,000 a year, and he's worth $70 billion. He has $7 billion less than Bill Gates. It's like, where'd that come from? Like, he's obviously smart at what he does.
And he has the loyalty of the Russian military to a degree no Russian leader has ever had.
And I don't think most people,
yeah,
I don't think most people understand, like, we hear the Putin propaganda here, and it's not saying he's a great guy because he'll shut dissent down like nobody else. But at the same time, the populace goes along with him for the most part.
Right. And Russia is a country that likes a strong man leader, that they want somebody that's decisive. And they tend to go along the lines of better the wins of one man than the wins of 100. They don't really care about representative government. They just want to be comfortable, and they're honest about it. And with Putin's propaganda machine, his foreign service record when he was with the KGB, the fact that this guy still goes and trains with Russian soldiers, like actually shows up and goes shooting with them and does unarmed combat stuff with them, this guy has a loyalty that, we've never seen anything like it in the U.S. except for maybe Eisenhower.
Yeah, Eisenhower, like, to me, I've always kind of, I got to speak to Laura Eisenhower about 6 months ago. I've always kind of personally felt back, like, thought he was all right, especially when he came out and said, hey, guess what? This is about to happen with the military-industrial complex. Nobody listened, and here we are.
Yeah. And his church left. And I think that a lot of analysts overlook how important that is. It's devastating to morale.
We have the president is the commander-in-chief, and we have Obama never served.
Right.
Bush, who was down here close to us in Montgomery, like, yeah, congratulations, you're an idiot too. These are your commander-in-chief. You're the head of the military. It's like, you know nothing.
Right. And they have, not just do they have a very decorated ex-spy, they have a decorated ex-spy that still shows up to train with them. It sounds so silly, but these soldiers are going to be like, I remember when Putin came down to the range, and as old as he is, he can still shoot. And, that kind of loyalty and almost mythic properties that they're assigning to this man, it's going to go a long way in combat. Because, you want to fight for a good leader. And they look at him as a good leader. So, that's, I can tell you right now, not a war I would want to fight on the U.S. side. I don't think it would end well. I don't see, because we don't even have any real allies over there either. We go in, and our allies are people that want to behead us.
Yeah.
Because we used them to destabilize Assad, and we're hoping that we could just go in and mop them up afterward. But now we're going to be fighting alongside these guys. I don't even know that they would agree. They've spent all of this time, their leadership has spent all of this time casting this image of being so anti-American.
I tell you what, Justin, we've only got like a minute left. If you're down, let's have you back on Thursday, and let's
that would be awesome.
Yeah, let's keep going with this. This has been an absolute great conversation. If you're down, we'll talk to you on Thursday.
Sounds good.
All right, sir. You have a good evening.
All right, you too.
All right. So, yeah, just about a minute here to go, Shannon. Your thoughts there real quick.
I am definitely not going to bring my dead pig over to David Cameron's house. So that's all I'm going to say about that.
But I tell you what, everybody, thank you so much for listening to Anti-Media Radio tonight. Thank you, Shannon Madden, the wonderful producer. Thank you, Justin King. And we will be back on Thursday. I'm your host, SM Gibson. Anti-Media Radio out.
Good night.
I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo.